The girl behind the counter. Every morning before the sun fully stretched its arms over the quiet town of Elmbrook, Talia was already awake. She tied her soft brown curls into a loose bun, slipped into her faded apron, and opened the door of Benson's bakery, the little corner shop where sugar hung in the air like perfume, and warm bread made even the saddest hearts feel safe. Talia didn't own the bakery, but she might as well have. Mr. Benson, the actual owner, rarely showed up anymore. Everyone came for the bread, yes, but they stayed because of her. Not that they knew her, though. To them, she was just the quiet girl at the counter, the one who never said much but always gave an extra cookie to children or remembered if you liked jam or butter. She didn't make big conversations. She made people feel understood. Old Mrs. Langley came in every Wednesday and always talked about how her son didn't call enough. Peter, the high school coach, came in every morning to flirt with a woman who never looked back at him. Anna, the florist down the street, once whispered about a pregnancy scare into her coffee. And Talia, she never asked. People just told her things. She was a listener, a soft place for the town's troubles to land. But when the bell above the door stopped ringing and the chairs were turned upside down for closing, Talia would wash her hands quietly, remove apron, and step back into a world that had no idea who she really was. She lived in a tiny upstairs room behind the bakery, a place filled with secondhand furniture, a flickering lamp, and a stack of notebooks. In those pages, she didn't write what others said to gossip. She wrote to remember, to understand. Talia knew secrets no one would dare speak out loud. She knew who cried themselves to sleep, who was cheating, who was lonely, who was pretending to be okay. But no one, not a single person, knew her. No one knew her favorite color was deep green. No one knew she painted at night with cheap watercolor sets. No one knew she'd once been a child who talked too much, until life taught her that some voices get drowned out no matter how loud they try. Now she preferred silence. It hurt less. Sometimes as she watched people laughing from her window, she wondered what it would feel like to be known. But she never said a word. It was a Friday morning when the wind outside the bakery howled louder than usual. Autumn had arrived, brushing golden leaves down the narrow streets like confetti no one ordered. Talia opened the bakery like always, wiped the counters, arranged the croissants just right, lit the cinnamon candle by the register, and then the day began, like it always did, with people and their whispered truths. First came Maya, the librarian with trembling fingers and eyes that always looked tired. "I told him I was fine," she said over her usual latte. "But I'm not. I don't think I've been fine in years." Talia nodded softly, sliding her the cup with an extra shot of comfort. Then came Daniel and Claire, the married couple who smiled too hard. "She thinks I don't know she's still texting him," Daniel muttered when Claire stepped outside to take a call. "He's always working late these days," Claire sighed 5 minutes later. "I think he's hiding something." Talia didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just refilled their mugs and smiled gently, because judgment had no seat at her counter. One after another, the townspeople walked in, each of them carrying invisible bags of sorrow. They dropped bits of it off with Talia, not realizing how much they were giving her. By noon, her heart was heavy with their burdens. During the quiet lull, she picked up her notebook and scribbled, "People want to be heard more than they want to be healed. Maybe listening is a kind of love." She closed the journal and placed it under the counter just as the bell chimed again. In walked a stranger, tall, with kind eyes and a guitar case slung across his back. Talia looked up for a brief second, and for the first time that day, something fluttered quietly in her chest. But the moment passed. He walked to the table by the window, looked around, and smiled softly in her direction. "Do you have something warm and sweet?" Talia nodded and handed him a cinnamon bun, warm from the oven. He thanked her, sincerely, and went to sit down. He didn't say much else, didn't talk about himself, didn't spill any secrets. He just watched the town go by outside the window, tapping his fingers on his cup. And for the first time in a very long time, someone sat in the bakery without adding a single weight to Talia's heart. She didn't know it yet, but the wind was starting to change. The stranger came back the next day, same time, same quiet. Talia noticed his eyes first, soft, thoughtful, the kind that had seen things they didn't talk about. He walked in with slow steps, like he wasn't in a hurry for anything, and smiled at her like they already knew each other, even though they didn't. He wore a navy hoodie, a little faded at the edges, and carried the same old guitar case on his back. He ordered a blueberry scone and black coffee this time. No sugar. "Thanks," he said gently as she handed him his change. Talia nodded, as she always did. But this time, she looked up. Just for a moment. Just long enough for their eyes to meet. It was a strange feeling. Being seen. Really seen. Not as the girl behind the counter, not as the listener, but as a person. She quickly looked down again, her heart suddenly too loud in her chest. The boy, unaware of the small storm he'd just stirred in her, found his spot by the window again. Same table, same chair. Like it was already his. From behind the counter, Talia stole little glances. He wasn't like the others. He didn't scroll through his phone. He didn't chat loudly. He didn't seem weighed down by secrets he needed to unload. He just sat there, watching the world. Quiet, still. And then, he pulled out a tiny notebook and started scribbling. It made her smile without thinking. At closing time, he was the last to leave. As he reached the door, he turned around and said, "This place, it feels like something good lives here." Talia blinked, and before she could say anything, he was gone. The next morning he returned, and the next, and the one after that, always around 10:30 a.m., always with his guitar, always sitting quietly writing, watching, and smiling at her whenever she looked his way. She began to expect him, woke up earlier, baked extra blueberry scones, refilled the cinnamon candle before he arrived, and though she never said more than a few words to him, her silence slowly began to feel different. Not empty, but full. One Tuesday, as rain tapped gently on the windows, the bakery was almost empty. Only a few customers had come and gone. The boy was there, sketching something in his notebook, humming to himself under his breath. Talia walked over to wipe the nearby table. Just as she turned to head back to the counter, he looked up. "Hey," he said softly. She paused. "Do you ever talk?" he asked, not teasing, not pushing, just curious. "Or do you prefer to stay invisible?" Talia stared at him, heart thumping, unsure how to answer. No one had ever asked her something like that before. He seemed to notice her panic and smiled again, this time reassuringly. "Sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant you feel like someone who holds stories but never tells any of your own." Still no answer. She just gave him the faintest shrug and walked back to the counter, cheeks warm. But that night, as she curled up in bed with her own notebook, she did something strange. She wrote his name. Even though he hadn't told her yet, she had overheard another customer greet him earlier that day. Leo, and under it she scribbled, "The boy who sees people, even the quiet ones." Leo came to the bakery. It was unusually quiet. The rain from the day before had given way to a thick morning fog, softening everything, the sounds, the light, even the way people moved through town. Talia was behind the counter, as always, wiping down trays, arranging fresh pastries, and pretending not to look at the door every time the bell jingled. But when it finally did and Leo stepped in, her eyes lifted, just for a moment, and their gaze met again. This time, he didn't go straight to his usual seat. He stood at the counter, hands in his hoodie pockets, eyes gentle. "What's your favorite thing on the menu?" he asked. It caught her off guard. No one ever asked her things like that. She hesitated, then pointed at the small honey lemon muffins sitting quietly on the second tray. "Those," she said almost in a whisper. "Then I'll take one, and whatever drink you think goes best with it." Talia blinked, then turned to prepare it. When she placed the muffin and warm chamomile tea in front of him, he smiled again. "Thanks for the recommendation and the quiet." She nodded, unsure what to say. But before she could retreat, he gently leaned forward. "You know," Leo began, voice soft but steady. "You know everyone's story in this town. I can tell. People come here to talk. You let them. But what about you?" Talia froze. "What's your story?" Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever asked her that, not even once, not even halfway. She didn't even realize she was holding the tray a little too tightly until her fingers ached. Leo wasn't being nosy. He wasn't trying to pry. He was just curious, kind. Talia opened her mouth, then closed it, then offered the safest thing she could. I bake. Leo tilted his head. That can't be all. Talia gave a small smile. One of those polite ones people give when they're trying to end a conversation without being rude. Leo didn't push. He simply nodded and carried his tray to the corner table like usual. But something had shifted. That night, Talia couldn't sleep. She sat by the small desk in her room, light from the tiny lamp flickering as the wind pressed against the window. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't open her usual journal. Instead, she reached for a fresh page, one she had never used. At the top, she wrote, "Dear Leo," and then she poured herself out. She wrote about growing up with her grandmother, about losing her at 16 and feeling like the world went quiet after that. She wrote about moving to Elmbrook with no family, no close friends, and finding peace only in routine and sugar. She wrote about how people told her everything, and yet no one ever noticed when she was sad. She wrote about painting in secret, about loving rainy days, about feeling invisible but strangely useful. Sometimes I wonder, she wrote, if I disappeared, would anyone really notice? Or would the cookies just be a little less warm? She didn't cry. She didn't need to. When she was done, she folded the page in half and placed it inside the back of her journal. Not the one she kept at the counter, but the one no one had ever seen. She didn't plan to give it to Leo. She just needed to say it, even if only on paper. Meanwhile, at that same hour, Leo sat by his window at the inn across town, strumming his guitar quietly, trying to find the words for a song he hadn't yet written. And in his mind, he wasn't thinking about melodies or lyrics. He was thinking about a girl with quiet eyes and a heart full of secrets. A girl who listened like she carried the whole town on her back. A girl who had smiled, just a little, when he asked her to tell her story. And he knew deep down that the quietest stories were always the ones worth hearing. But something else lingered in the air, something softer than weather. Talia felt it as soon as she woke up, a quiet hum beneath her chest, a small warmth she didn't recognize at first. She got dressed slowly, brushed flour off her apron before she even left her room, and opened the bakery with a kind of care that felt deliberate. She didn't know why, or maybe she did. Leo didn't come in that morning. She waited, even though she told herself she wasn't. She looked up each time the bell rang, expecting his navy hoodie and quiet smile. But it was only the usuals, the gossiping neighbors, the woman with the angry toddler, the man who always ordered 2 meat pies and left without a word. She said little, like always, but inside, she was quieter than usual. When the day ended and the bakery closed, she stood behind the counter for a long time, not moving, just listening to the silence. And then, without thinking, she pulled out the letter she had written the night before, the one addressed to Leo, and read it again. Her heart thudded with every word. She hadn't written it for him to see, yet reading it now made her want to fold it into an envelope and slide it into his hands. It was terrifying and tempting. That evening, as the streetlights flickered on and the town grew sleepy, Talia stepped out for a walk, something she rarely did. The bakery smelled like sugar and quiet, but outside, the air was fresh, clean. It whispered of things changing. She didn't go far. Just around the corner, down to the bookstore, then past the little inn tucked beneath the trees. She stopped there, heart pounding, without a plan. Leo was staying here. She knew that. He had mentioned it once, casually. She reached into her coat pocket and felt the folded letter in her hand. Software thin, alive. She stared at the inn's front steps for a while. Then, she turned around and walked back home. She couldn't do it. Not yet. Back in her room, she placed the letter carefully inside a wooden box beneath her bed. A box where she kept old sketches, faded postcards, and a dried daisy from her grandmother's garden. She whispered to it as she closed the lid. Maybe one day. The next morning, he was back. Leo walked into the bakery like nothing had changed, like he hadn't skipped a day, like he hadn't left a storm in her chest behind. "Hey," he said gently. "Sorry I missed yesterday. Went to the next town to buy some guitar strings." Talia nodded slowly, relief spilling into her ribs. I brought you something, he added, pulling a small wrapped package from his bag. She blinked. It's a book, he said, placing it on the counter. One of my favorites. There's a character in it that reminds me of you. She didn't ask which one. She didn't open the wrapping yet either. She just stared at it, as though holding a piece of sunlight she wasn't sure she deserved. Leo didn't expect a thank you. He just smiled and walked to his seat. And in that moment, Talia realized something. She wasn't invisible to him, and that scared her more than anything else ever had. Because being unseen was lonely. But being seen, truly seen, meant letting someone in. And Talia had built her entire life around staying hidden. That night before sleep, she took out the letter again. She didn't rewrite it. She didn't rip it up. She simply folded it more neatly, pressed it flat, and wrote one thing at the very bottom. The first raindrop landed on the bakery window around 4:15 p.m. The smell of cinnamon rolls was still fresh in the air, and Talia had just finished wiping down the last table. She stood by the glass, watching the droplets gather, then race each other down the pane like tiny stories sliding into the earth. Most people had left early. Rain always emptied the streets in Elmbrook. But not Leo. He was still seated by the window, sipping his tea, guitar case propped beside him like an old friend. Looks like we're stuck here, he said, glancing up at her with a soft smile. Talia looked at the clouds, then at him. Then for the first time, she said more than a sentence. You don't mind the rain? Leo shook his head. I like it. Makes the world softer, quieter, easier to feel things. That made her heart stutter. Most people hated the rain. He welcomed it. She hesitated, then walked over to his table and sat across from him. She had never done that before. Not with anyone. Leo didn't seem surprised. He just slid the small sugar jar toward her, as if they had done this 100 times already. What do you do when you're not here? He asked, voice gentle. What's your world like? Talia stared at the rain for a moment, and then, almost shyly, she said, I paint. Leo blinked. Really? She nodded. Watercolors mostly, but I don't show anyone. It's just for me. Can I see one someday? Talia looked down, suddenly nervous, brushing her fingers against the table's edge. Maybe, Leo smiled. That's fair. The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled lazily across the sky. When it was time to close, Talia walked to the door and turned the sign. Leo stood up too, slowly packing his things. Do you want me to walk you home? He asked. Talia hesitated. She always walked alone. But for some reason, tonight didn't feel like the usual night. So she said the words she almost never said. Okay. They stepped into the rain together. No umbrella. Just the soft patter of water on rooftops and the distant glow of streetlights. The world felt smaller in the rain, cozier somehow. They didn't talk much. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It was warm. Halfway to her apartment, Leo looked up and laughed as water slid off his hoodie. We look ridiculous. Talia laughed too, out loud. A real laugh. It came from a place that had been sleeping for years. It surprised even her. Leo turned toward her, his smile gentle and amazed. You should do that more often. What? Laugh. She didn't know how to respond, so she just kept walking. But her smile lingered longer than usual. When they reached her door, Leo didn't try to come in. He just stood under the dripping awning, his hoodie soaked, his expression soft. Thanks for the walk, he said. Thanks for asking, she replied, repeating the words she had written in her letter. He tilted his head slightly, sensing there was more to that sentence than she'd said, but he didn't push. Good night, Talia. Good night, Leo. And then he walked away. She stood there for a long time after he left, watching the rain, holding the moment like it might break if she let go. Then she went upstairs, peeled off her wet clothes, and sat by the window in an oversized sweater, staring out at the night. And for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen. The days that followed felt lighter, not just in the bakery, but in Talia's chest. Something had changed. She still listened to people's secrets, still nodded kindly as they poured their hearts out over coffee and croissants. But now, She had a small light of her own, a warmth no one else could see. Leo. He came every day now, always at the same table, always with that calm energy that felt like music without sound. Sometimes he'd bring her a small gift, a bookmark, a tiny pebble shaped like a heart, or a page torn from a book with a quote highlighted. Nothing big, just little things that said, "I notice you." And every time, she'd tuck them away in her wooden box beside the letter. He still hadn't seen the letter, but she had started painting again. And this time, her watercolors were brighter. Streaks of sunrise, soft blues, golden specks that danced along the edges of trees. She painted how he made her feel. Seen, safe, soft. One slow afternoon, the bakery was almost empty. Only the sound of the bell over the door and the light hum of a ceiling fan filled the space. Leo had finished his tea but didn't leave. Instead, he walked to the counter and asked, "Do you want to sit outside for a while? Just you and me?" Talia glanced out the window. The sun was warm, the sky quiet. "Just for a few minutes," she said. They sat by the bakery's side patio, a little space with 2 chairs and some flower pots. Talia rarely used it. Leo leaned back, face turned toward the sky. "You know, I used to be on big stages," he said. "City crowds, noise, lights, always moving." Talia. The sky was heavy with clouds that Friday morning. Not stormy, just gray. The kind of gray that makes everything feel slower. Inside the bakery, the warmth of the oven and the smell of fresh banana bread made it feel like a small world of its own. Talia was wiping the front counter when she heard the bell jingle. Twice. It was Naomi and Clara, 2 of the town's most active talkers. They greeted her quickly, ordered their usual raisin scones and sweet tea, and picked a corner table. At first, it was just the normal whispers. "Did you hear what happened at the library? She's definitely seeing him again. Her poor husband." Talia didn't tune in this time. She was tired, or maybe distracted. Her thoughts were with Leo. He had promised to sing something for her today. He hadn't played in front of anyone since his brother died, but he said he might try again, just for her. She was nervous and excited, and a little scared. So she didn't notice that Clara had gotten up, walked behind the counter while Talia stepped into the kitchen to grab more napkins. She didn't notice the sound of a drawer sliding open. She didn't hear the gasp when Clara found the small journal tucked neatly near the register. Not her main one, not the secret one, but a small, older book, one she used to jot bits and pieces before transferring them to her box. Clara opened the first page. Names, dates, emotions. He's still cheating. She doesn't know. They lost the baby last month. Haven't told anyone yet. He cries every Tuesday at 4:50 p.m. before calling his wife. Clara's mouth fell open. By the time Talia returned, the book was already in Naomi's hands. Their eyes were wide, shocked, offended. "Talia," Clara began, voice trembling between outrage and curiosity. "What is this?" Talia froze. She looked at the book, then at them, then at the other customers who were already turning around. The room spun. "It's nothing. Just thoughts," she whispered. "Thoughts?" Naomi scoffed. "These are people's lives. You've been writing down everything we've ever told you. Everything." "It's not what you think," Talia said, her voice breaking. "So you've been collecting secrets?" Clara asked. "Are we just entertainment to you?" No. I never shared them. I never told anyone. I just wanted to understand people better." The bakery had never felt so quiet, and for the first time, it felt cold. Word spread fast. By the end of the day, everyone in Elmbrook was whispering about the girl at the bakery. They didn't come in like usual. The bell didn't jingle. No one asked for pastries. They stayed away. Talia sat alone on the floor behind the counter, hugging her knees, eyes red. Leo found her like that when he walked in just before closing. He didn't ask questions. He just dropped to the floor beside her and sat there, silent. After a few minutes, she looked at him. "They hate me." "No, they're just afraid," he said softly. "But I never meant to hurt anyone. I never told a soul. I just kept it all inside. It helped me make sense of things. Leo nodded. People get scared when someone knows too much, especially when that someone is quiet. Talia leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you hate me too? He looked at her, truly looked at her, then shook his head. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Talia closed her eyes. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow, or the day after that. But for now, she wasn't alone. Leo was still here, and that meant something. The fog lifted the next morning, but something else lingered in the air. Something softer than weather. Talia felt it as soon as she woke up, a quiet hum beneath her chest, a small warmth she didn't recognize at first. She got dressed slowly, brushed flour off her apron before she even left her room, and opened the bakery with a kind Leo didn't come in that morning. She waited, even though she told herself she wasn't. She looked up each time the bell rang, expecting his navy hoodie and quiet smile. But it was only the usuals. The gossiping neighbors, the woman with the angry toddler, the man who always ordered 2 meat pies and left without a word. She said little, like always, but inside, she was quieter than usual. When the day ended and the bakery closed, she stood behind the counter for a long time, not moving, just listening to the silence. And then, without thinking, she pulled out the letter she had written the night before, the one addressed to Leo, and read it again. Her heart thudded with every word. She hadn't written it for him to see, yet reading it now made her want to fold it into an envelope and slide it into his hands. It was terrifying and tempting. That evening, as the streetlights flickered on and the town grew sleepy, Talia stepped out for a walk. Something she rarely did. The bakery smelled like sugar and quiet, but outside, the air was fresh, clean. It whispered of things changing. She didn't go far. Just around the corner, down to the bookstore, then past the little inn tucked beneath the trees. She stopped there, heart pounding, without a plan. Leo was staying here. She knew that. He had mentioned it once, casually. She reached into her coat pocket and felt the folded letter in her hand. Software thin, alive. She stared at the inn's front steps for a while. Then, she turned around and walked back home. She couldn't do it. Not yet. Back in her room, she placed the letter carefully inside a wooden box beneath her bed. A box where she kept old sketches, faded postcards, and a dried daisy from her grandmother's garden. She whispered to it as she closed the lid. Maybe one day. The next morning he was back. Leo walked into the bakery like nothing had changed, like he hadn't skipped a day, like he hadn't left a storm in her chest behind. Hey, he said gently. Sorry I missed yesterday. Went to the next town to buy some guitar strings. Talia nodded slowly, relief spilling into her ribs. I brought you something, he added, pulling a small wrapped package from his bag. She blinked. It's a book, he said, placing it on the counter. One of my favorites. There's a character in it that reminds me of you. She didn't ask which one. She didn't open the wrapping yet either. She just stared at it, as though holding a piece of sunlight she wasn't sure she deserved. Leo didn't expect a thank you. He just smiled and walked to his seat. And in that moment, Talia realized something. She wasn't invisible to him. And that scared her more than anything else ever had. Because being unseen was lonely. But being seen, truly seen, meant letting someone in. And Talia had built her entire life around staying hidden. That night before sleep, she took out the letter again. She didn't rewrite it. She didn't rip it up. She simply folded it more neatly, pressed it flat, and wrote one thing at the very bottom. Looked at him, surprised. He continued, My brother was my bandmate. We grew up together, played together. He was the loud one. I was the calm. Talia waited. We lost him 2 years ago. Just like that. Car accident. After that, the music, it stopped. For both of us, really. She felt her chest tighten. I came here to get away from the noise, from the grief, from everything. He looked at her, eyes soft but glassy. And then I found this little bakery, and this girl, who listened better than anyone I've ever met. Talia didn't speak, but she reached out slowly and placed her hand gently over his. Just for a second, and that second was enough. Later that evening, she sat by the bakery window, watching as Leo walked down the road with his guitar case, disappearing into the golden light. She felt full. Not of other people's secrets this time, but of her own unfolding. That night she painted again. But this time, she didn't just paint colors. She painted him, sitting beneath the bakery sign, smiling, holding a teacup, his guitar leaning beside him. She titled it, "The First Person Who Ever Stayed." Felt colder. Not because of the weather, but because of the distance. No one came to the bakery. Not a single soul. Talia still opened it. She wiped the counters, baked the bread, lined up the pastries, but the bell didn't ring. The warm hum of chatter and footsteps had vanished, replaced by an invisible wall between her and the town she had served with quiet kindness for years. She sat behind the counter in silence, holding a cup of tea she didn't drink. In her chest was a weight she couldn't name. Not anger, not shame, but something in between. A kind of sorrow that came from being misunderstood by the very people she had tried to love in her own quiet way. By afternoon, she almost closed early, but Leo walked in, just like he always did. Only this time, he wasn't alone. He brought his guitar. "I need to show you something," he said gently. Talia looked up, confused. "Come with me." They walked to the town square. It was market day. People were out, shopping, murmuring, pretending not to notice Talia as she passed. Mothers held their children's hands tighter. Shopkeepers looked away. She felt their stares like tiny cuts. At the edge of the square, Leo stopped, took out a small wooden stool from a bag, and placed it on the stone platform near the fountain, the one where announcements were sometimes made. He sat down. Then in front of everyone, he began to play. A gentle melody, soft, aching, beautiful. People turned, one by one, first out of curiosity, then awe. His voice joined the guitar, low, warm, steady. She stands behind the counter, smile like a quiet breeze, holds the secrets of 1,000 hearts, but never says what she needs. She listens like a lighthouse, steady through the storm, but no one asks her story, no one keeps her warm. Talia's throat tightened, her eyes shimmered. The song wasn't just about her, it was her. Leo kept singing, his voice wrapped the town in honesty, the kind they had forgotten how to feel. When the last note faded into the breeze, he looked at Talia, then stepped aside. "Now you talk," he whispered. Talia stood frozen, dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some cold, some softened. She had never spoken in front of a crowd, but something inside her rose, not loudly, not like fire, but like light. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "You've all told me your secrets, and I never judged you. Not once. I listened because that's the only way I know how to love people. I wrote them down because I didn't know how to hold so much pain without putting it somewhere." Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "I never told a soul. I never used your stories against you. I just wanted to feel connected. Because for a long time I felt invisible, like I don't exist unless I'm helping someone else." She swallowed, the words tasting like truth. "But I exist. I have stories too. I cry sometimes. I miss my grandmother every night. I paint pictures I never show. I am not just the girl who listens. I'm a person, a woman, a heart that beats just like yours." The silence was thick, and then, slowly, someone clapped. It was Maya, the librarian. Then Mr. Benson, her boss. Then a few more. Talia blinked, stunned. Someone whispered, "I'm sorry." Another said, "I didn't know." She didn't expect forgiveness, but she had told the truth. And now they knew her, not just as the girl behind the counter, but as Talia. Leo walked over and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, proud. "You didn't just speak," he whispered. "You gave them a voice, too." Talia smiled, tears on her cheeks, but not from sadness, from relief. The girl who was heard. 2 weeks passed. The bakery was full again, but something was different now. Not just in how people came, but in how they saw her. They said her name more now. Talia, with warmth, with familiarity, with a soft kind of respect. Mrs. Langley started bringing her handmade scarves. Coach Peter offered to repaint the bakery sign for free. Even Naomi, the same woman who had nearly humiliated her, came with a bouquet of wildflowers and whispered, "I was wrong." Talia didn't need apologies, but she accepted every kindness, because now for the first time, she felt seen, not for what she could carry, but for who she truly was. One evening, after the sun dipped low and golden over Elmbrook, Leo waited outside the bakery. He stood with his guitar and something else in his hand, a folded sheet of watercolor paper. Talia stepped out, brushing flour off her apron, her hair loosely tied, soft and radiant. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the paper. He handed it to her without a word. It was one of her own paintings, one she had given him quietly a few days before. But now, he had added words over the top, lyrics. The girl who knew every secret, but held her own like treasure. The girl who smiled through silence, now sings her truth with pleasure. Talia pressed the paper to her chest, moved beyond words. "You wrote this for me?" "No," Leo said, stepping closer. "We wrote it. Your art, my words." She smiled, eyes glassy. "Come with me," he said gently. He led her down the street, past the bookstore, past the square, past the inn, to a newly painted shop space with a glass door. On the window was a handwritten sign that read, "Coming soon, the listening room. Art, music, and tea, by Leo and Talia." She turned to him, speechless. "A place where people can come," Leo said, "not to vent or gossip, but to feel, to heal, to just be." Talia placed her hand over her heart, overwhelmed. "This is everything." "You are everything," Leo whispered. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The first time she had reached out to anyone without being asked. And under the fading sky, in a town that once overlooked her, Talia finally belonged. Not as the girl who held secrets, but as the girl who found her voice and used it to make others feel less alone. And just like that, the girl who had always listened was finally heard.